Good morning. We had a situation here in New York City Tuesday night. Police arrested at least 100 pro-Palestinian students at Columbia and City College right here in Manhattan. Students at Columbia had seized a building and held it for 20 hours. The students at City College attempted to take over an administrative building, but were stopped. And the reports we're getting, at least that I'm getting, is that the protests on the street are continuing outside City College, which is in north of Columbia. And the protests at Columbia, from what I've been told, have kind of died down. But you can see at this video that it's a little rougher up at City College than it was at Columbia. But then again, we don't really know what happened at Columbia because the police kicked photographers off the quad and they weren't allowed to videotape any of this. So late yesterday evening, hundreds of New York City police officers in riot gear gathered outside the gates of Columbia, where students 20 hours earlier seized Hamilton Hall, refusing to leave until the university agreed to sever all business ties with the nation of Israel. At roughly 9:13 p.m., police moved in on the Columbia campus. Law enforcement officials say they were acting after receiving an official letter from the university giving the police department permission to move in. Within about 40 minutes of the police entering the campus, we began hearing reports that riot police officers, tactical police officers, entered Hamilton Hall exactly 20 hours after protesters first took it over. Within 90 minutes, we received reports that police had cleared out Hamilton Hall, zip-tied the students barricaded inside the building, and arrested them. We're going to assume most of the people arrested in Hamilton Hall were students, but that's subject to debate. The police also said that within 90 minutes of entering the campus, they had removed every protester from the campus, and all that was left were their empty tents. There are reports that New York City police ordered reporters and photographers from Reuters, the New York Times, and the Washington Post off the campus, forbidding them from videotaping police activities. There are reports that the police used flash-bang grenades when they entered Hamilton Hall. The Washington Post initially reported that police entered Hamilton Hall with their guns drawn, but then the Washington Post said they were unable to confirm that. We now have reports that Columbia's president, Neemak Shafit, has officially requested that New York City police remain on campus until the middle of May, probably to make sure there are no disruptions planned for Columbia's graduation ceremonies, which are scheduled for May 15th. This comes 2 weeks after New York City police arrested 100 protesters on the Columbia campus and ordered them to remove their tent encampments. Since those arrests, protests only intensified, with new tents springing up as some faculty members joined in the protests. The New York Times reports that by the time police showed up late last night, there were still 100 tents on the Columbia campus. So, in less than an hour after police entered the Columbia campus, tactical police began entering Hamilton Hall. Mass arrests outside Hamilton Hall began with 2, maybe more, police buses completely filled with protesters that was heading downtown so these protesters could be placed in holding cells. There are reports that as many as 5 police buses were on the scene. A spokesperson for the New York City Police Department told reporters when they entered the campus, they did not use tear gas, adding that New York police never rely on tear gas. However, there are reports that when protesters at New York City College made moves earlier this week to seize a building, police hit them with pepper spray. So apparently the spokesperson for the New York City Police, who said New York City Police never use tear gas, conveniently forgot to mention they have no problem using pepper spray. The New York Times says pepper spray was used on college students this week in Richmond, Virginia, as well as Austin, Texas. As New York City police entered the Columbia campus, the university issued an official statement that read, quote, "We regret that protesters have chosen to escalate the situation through their actions." The statement went on to say, after the university learned overnight that Hamilton Hall had been occupied, vandalized, and blockaded, we were left with no choice. We will not risk the safety of our community or the potential for further escalation. Yes, Columbia will not risk the safety of their community unless they want to gentrify and throw people out of single-room occupancies to expand the campus. Then it's okay to risk the safety of the Columbia community. New York City Police Commissioner Edward Cabin held a press conference earlier on Tuesday, accusing protesters who seized Columbia's building of being outside agitators. He insisted they were not students. The Deputy Commissioner of New York Police Department's Counterterrorism Bureau, Rebecca Weiner, told reporters she knows who these protesters holed up in the building were. She said most of them are not students. She said these outside agitators are well versed in convincing peaceful protesters to change tactics and become more violent. Do you believe they were outside agitators, or do you think they were students who were married to their convictions? An editor for Columbia's school newspaper said that the protesters who took the building were mostly students, not outside agitators. But the editor confirmed that some of the protesters were not attending Columbia. There are also reports that students, despite the arrests, students at Columbia are planning to continue their protests as early as later today. Be interesting to find out if New York City's multi-billion-dollar counterterrorism bureau got it right, whether or not they were outside agitators who seized the building or just students. The head of the Counterterrorism Bureau here in New York seemed to speak with absolute certitude that these were not students who seized Hamilton Hall. They knew for a fact it was outside agitators. New York Police Department's Counterterrorism Bureau Chief Rebecca Weiner said outside agitators were using intimidation to silence innocent Columbia students who called for more peaceful demonstrations. And she warned that what is happening at Columbia, the seizing of a building, will most likely spread to college campuses, not just here in New York City, but throughout the country. Well, that she got right. At City College, they tried to seize an administrative building, but the police were able to hold them back. By mid-afternoon on Tuesday, New York's Mayor Eric Adams issued a statement telling protesters who seized the building to leave immediately. New York City police told Columbia they were prepared to take back Hamilton Hall, make arrests, and charge the protesters inside the building with trespassing, criminal mischief, and third-degree burglary. Police said they would only move once Columbia officially asked them to. At about 9 p.m. last night, the police received a letter from Columbia authorizing them to enter, and so they moved in. The problem, of course, is any police presence will often escalate the situation, which is why Columbia seems to have waited 20 hours after Hamilton Hall had been seized before asking police to go in there. Early reports so far show no sign of police misconduct. We'll learn more later today. It'll be difficult to verify this because the police ordered photographers, videographers from Reuters, the New York Times, and the Washington Post off the campus, and the press was not allowed to monitor New York City police. And if history shows anything, it's that New York City police should be monitored at all times. Monday was the last day of classes for Columbia's spring semester. Final exams are scheduled to begin on Friday. And it looks like some people didn't get their studying done this week. As police gathered outside the university waiting for orders to go in, a Palestinian flag flew above the building that students had seized. They remained barricaded in there waiting for the police while supporters stood outside chanting "Free Palestine." The exact number of protesters who occupied the building is not yet known, although a spokesman for Columbia put the number at several dozen. The university is now officially closed to anyone who doesn't live in its residential halls. This situation at Columbia, with the New York police called in, is far different from the situation at another Ivy League school, Brown, up in Rhode Island, where the administration agreed to some student demands by promising to hold a referendum on whether Brown should sell off its financial stake in Israeli businesses. Brown has scheduled this vote for October. In Austin, Texas, there are reports that the county prosecutor urged University of Texas Austin administrators to work out some sort of agreement with protesters after local police told county prosecutors they are not equipped to break up demonstrations of that magnitude. The BBC reports this morning that Northwestern University in the suburbs of Chicago de-escalated their situation by meeting some of the demands of protesters on their campus. This is far different from how Columbia handled it. When tent encampments sprung up last Thursday at Northwestern University, administrators did call in the police, but no arrests were made, even after demonstrators refused to leave. On Monday, a deal was struck between the administration of Northwestern University, and the protesters. Demonstrators, according to this deal, were allowed to remain on the campus for the entire month of May, but those protesters could only be students, nobody from the outside. Protesters, in return, agreed to remove their tents, and once the tents are removed, the university promised to create 2 new teaching posts for Palestinian professors, and the university also promised to fund tuition for 5 Palestinian students. I'm not sure if it's 5 Palestinian students per year or if that's a one-off. I'll find out. Northwestern University told protesters while they were negotiating that it would not divest itself from Israeli investments, but said it would offer more transparency over its $14 billion endowment and promised to convene a committee that will study how better to invest that money. No arrests, compromise, no show of force. And according to the BBC, as of this morning, the truce between Northwestern University administrators and the protesters seems to be holding. Sounds like Hamas and Benjamin Netanyahu have something to learn from Northwestern University. Maybe Columbia has something to learn from Northwestern University. Earlier on Tuesday, the White House condemned the protesters at Columbia, saying forcibly taking over buildings is not peaceful and not free speech. The Washington Post estimates more than 1,200 students have been arrested around the country while protesting their college's business ties with Israel. Since April 23rd, arrests have been made at the University of New Mexico, University of Utah, University of Minnesota, Washington University, University of Illinois, Ohio State, Indiana University, Emerson, Princeton, University of Georgia, University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, Yale, and the University of South Carolina. Those are just a few of the colleges where students were arrested protesting the situation in Gaza and their individual colleges and universities investing in businesses with ties to Israel. Police arrested 35 demonstrators at the Cal Poly campus in Humboldt, California. There seems to be peace now at Cal Poly. 9 were arrested at the University of Florida. One of those protesters has been charged with assault after allegedly spitting at a police officer during their arrest. Arizona State University police officers are accused of removing headscarves from 4 Muslim women arrested for protesting on the Arizona State University campus Saturday. Lawyers for the 4 Muslim women say they tried to explain to the police officers that their religion forbids them from being out in public without any head covering, but the police officers ripped the head covering off their heads anyway. Arizona has one of America's largest Muslim communities, comparable to that of Michigan's. Arizona State University is attended by thousands of Muslim students, so it's hard to believe the arresting officers didn't know the significance of a head covering. 79 protesters were arrested at the University of Texas campus in Austin, Texas. Before last night's police crackdown, the Columbia protests in New York had sparked demonstrations of solidarity worldwide. Rallies sprung up at Kuwait University as students there held signs showing solidarity with Columbia students. Marches on college campuses erupted in Tunisia, as well as the American University in Beirut. This is the mop-up for May 1st. It's May Day. It really is May Day here in America, 2024. I'm David Feldman in New York City. Thank you for finding me. American Secretary of State Anthony Blinken is working behind the scenes trying to negotiate a ceasefire in Gaza between the Israeli government and Hamas, the ruling political party inside Gaza that laid claim to the attacks of October 7th. Also in the works seems to be the normalization of relations between Saudi Arabia and Israel. Normalization between Israel and Saudi Arabia has been in the works since Jared Kushner negotiated the Abraham Accords back in 2020. Some think a thaw between Saudi Arabia and Israel might have played a major part in Hamas deciding to attack Israel on October 7th. Some believe Hamas feared that Saudi Arabia and Israel opening up diplomatic as well as commercial ties without factoring in the plight of the Palestinians would leave the people of Gaza with nothing. Geopolitically, Israel and Saudi Arabia share a mutual distrust of Iran, and a potential security agreement between the two nations could send shockwaves throughout the region. Iran and Saudi Arabia are on opposite sides of that civil war in Yemen, which shares a border with Saudi Arabia. Yemen's Houthi rebels, financed by Iran, have fired missiles into Saudi Arabia as well as Israel. Iran finances Hezbollah, the paramilitary organization that has gained a political stronghold in southern Lebanon. Hezbollah and Israel have engaged in several skirmishes since fighting broke out in Gaza, but nothing compared to the magnitude we saw back in 2006 when war between Israel and Hezbollah broke out with disastrous consequences for both Israel and Lebanon. The general sense is that if Israel and Saudi Arabia form some sort of alliance, Iran might think twice about stirring up trouble in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and of course, Gaza. I wonder if America would then think twice about stirring up trouble in Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, and of course, Gaza. Although Iran is only one of several Arab nations, including Saudi Arabia and Qatar, that has been financing Hamas, it seems like Iran at this point has a little more sway over Hamas than it has had before. Qatar also is financing Hamas. Donald Trump wasted no time comparing the campus unrest to the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville, where white nationalists marched on the University of Virginia, holding tiki torches, shouting, "Jews will not replace us." A protester was killed when one of the white nationalists drove his car into a crowd of demonstrators. Trump told Time magazine this week these college protests that we're witnessing are far more violent than anything we saw in Charlottesville. Simply not true. Nobody has been killed on these college campuses. In the Time interview, Trump also expressed concern about the racism against white people that seems to be spreading in this country ever since Joe Biden became president. So Trump defends the Unite the Right rally in Charlottesville and then says he's worried about the racism directed against white people in America, all the unarmed white people shot in the back by police. It's an epidemic of unarmed white people getting shot by police. Unbelievable. Trump then compared this week's campus protests to his own supporters who stormed the Capitol on January 6. He remarked how unfair it is that these students won't get prosecuted by the Biden Justice Department the way the January 6ers are being held as political prisoners, he said. Trump said this is why the fact that these, excuse me, he said the college kids not being arrested, but the January 6ers getting arrested, he said this is why Americans have lost faith in our court system. No, Donald, Americans have lost faith in our court system because you are still free. In that interview with Time magazine, Trump added, if elected again, he would most probably pardon all of the insurrectionists currently doing time for their role on January 6. In the interview, Trump refused to rule out political violence if he loses in November. Trump said if the count is not fair, he can't guarantee his supporters will sit back and allow another election to be stolen. Juan Merchan, the judge presiding over Donald Trump's criminal hush money trial in New York City, had enough of Trump and fined him on Tuesday $9,000 for violating a gag order, which forbids Trump from trash-talking witnesses who are scheduled to testify against him. Trump was then ordered to take down his social media posts targeting Michael Cohen, that's Trump's former lawyer, who will be testifying for the prosecution later this month. And by mid-afternoon, Trump's posts were scrubbed in accordance with the judge's ruling. Trump obeys the judge. When the judge says sit, he sits. When the judge says shut up, in the courtroom at least, he shuts up. And when he ordered Trump to scrub his social media of attacks against Michael Cohen, he did as he was told. Bullies usually do what they're told, but you need to tell them. Judge Merchan then warned Trump that should the gag order violations continue, he will not hesitate in locking Trump up. One night in jail, one night. Hundreds of protesters in New York City are spending the night in jail. But there's no room at the inn for this homunculus, this orange spray-tanned turd, Donald Trump. They don't have a cell for Donald Trump. Well, worse news for Donald Trump on Tuesday when the judge ruled that Trump can, in fact, attend his son's high school graduation in Florida later this month, which now means Trump has no excuse for not being there. Now he's got to show up. You think it's torture for him to sit 8 hours in a courtroom, having to spend time with his family? Even tougher. There are several reports that this trial is taking a toll on Donald Trump. If you've seen him walk into the courtroom, walk out of the courtroom at the end of the day, he's stooped, tired, and distant. He seems depressed, although I don't think his mental illness allows for melancholy. Trump no longer pretends to stay awake. And on Tuesday, he drifted off once again during court proceedings, almost as a sign of disrespect. It was a sign of disrespect, but more likely the horse tranquilizer he's been prescribed to keep his mouth shut so he doesn't violate yet another gag order. Trump is not doing well. He feels abandoned, isolated, and that explains why, for the first time since this trial began, his son Eric accompanied him. And I can only assume he felt even more isolated, alone, and abandoned, with that idiot standing by his side. Noticeably absent from all these trials, Melania. I wonder why. Is it something Trump might have said? Like, hey, my wife is pregnant, want to have unprotected sex with me? Or, hey, my wife just gave me a son, want to have unprotected sex with me? I think that might have been what he said. Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton showed up on Tuesday to offer his support. Paxton stood behind Trump while the former president talked to reporters. Paxton, you might remember, back in 2020, filed a lawsuit challenging Pennsylvania's election results that awarded their electoral votes to Joe Biden. But that case was thrown out by the Supreme Court before they even heard it. Paxton told reporters he showed up to offer Trump moral support, more like immoral support, because he said, quote, the trial is a sham. You might remember Paxton was impeached last year by the Texas state legislature, which failed to win a conviction. A nearly 10-year federal investigation into security fraud almost landed Texas Attorney General Paxton almost landed him a 10-year prison sentence. That trial was scheduled to start last month, but at the 11th hour, Paxton and prosecutors struck a deal where the Texas Attorney General agreed to perform 100 hours of community service and take a 15-hour course in legal ethics. Paxton also agreed to pay close to $300,000 in restitutions to those he is accused of ripping off. This would be the Texas Attorney General. Still Texas Attorney General. Paxton reached the settlement in return for not having to offer up a guilty plea. Well, like I said, Trump feels lonely. Maggie Haberman over at the New York Times reports, on Tuesday, Trump's top campaign aides never left his side because this is not a man who has real friends, only supplicants, only people who are on the clock. Last week, we heard reports of Trump's disappointment that nobody showed up outside the courthouse to protest this trial. He was forced to lie about the scarcity, the dearth of MAGA morons. He claimed, well, nobody's there because the city is blocking his people from congregating. A lie, a lie. But on Monday, for the first time since the trial began, there were reports of pro-Trump protesters. Tuesday, they saw some pro-Trump protesters, but only a few dozen. And it looks like Eric and the family and the campaign aides decided to boost Donald's spirits by hiring Rent-A-Mob, but even they couldn't deliver. You might remember when he came down the escalator in 2015 to declare his candidacy, the entire crowd cheering for him was a Rent-A-Mob. They were all paid $50 to cheer him on. One America News, the far-right news network with aspirations of becoming the next Fox, retracted a story yesterday claiming that it was Trump's fixer, Michael Cohen, who had the affair with porn star Stormy Daniels, not Donald Trump, and that the hush money payments made by the Trump organization were part of a plan hatched by Cohen and Stormy Daniels to extort Donald Trump. Cohen threatened to sue unless One America News apologized, which they did. One America News has been sued by two major voting machine companies for their lies about the 2020 election. Hunter Biden threatened legal action against Fox News unless they removed graphic images of the president's son from their website. Lawyers for Hunter Biden said the Fox News website also included erroneous information claiming the Biden family accepted bribes from a Ukrainian billionaire, a story that has since been discredited by the FBI. Lawyers for Hunter Biden warned Fox that new revenge porn laws make it illegal for Fox to post any images taken off Hunter Biden's laptop featuring him naked or close to naked. On Tuesday, Fox News responded to the threat of a lawsuit by quietly taking down the stories about Hunter Biden's laptop and his family's ties to a Ukrainian oligarch. Last year, Hunter Biden filed a lawsuit against Rudy Giuliani, who served as Donald Trump's point person digging up dirt on Hunter Biden in the lead up to the 2020 presidential election. Hunter had left his laptop in a Delaware repair shop while he was on a crack binge, and he failed to pick it up. The owner of the repair shop, instead of giving it back to Hunter, turned the laptop over to Rudy Giuliani, who peddled the contents to the New York Post. In Biden's lawsuit, he now accuses Giuliani of violating his privacy by turning over personal data without his permission. And the criminal lawsuits keep piling up for Rudy Giuliani. Last week, an Arizona grand jury indicted America's mayor, along with Trump's White House chief of staff, Mark Meadows, and Trump's current personal attorney, Boris Epshteyn, for their participation in Arizona's phony elector scheme, in which they are alleged to have conspired to put together an alternative slate of Arizona electors for Donald Trump to be counted on January 6th, despite Joe Biden winning the popular vote in that state. Meadows and Giuliani were indicted in Georgia for their role in trying to overturn the election results in that state. A portion of that indictment includes charging them with orchestrating the phony elector scheme in Georgia. Michigan has also handed down indictments in that state's phony elector scheme, but Michigan failed to indict anyone from the White House. However, the Detroit News is now reporting that Donald Trump was named in the Michigan lawsuit as an unindicted co-conspirator. Jeffrey Clark was the low-level Justice Department official Donald Trump hoped to name as acting attorney general in the final days of his presidency, after Clark proved himself the only Justice Department lawyer willing to prosecute phony claims of voter fraud. Clark was indicted in Georgia, along with 18 other co-defendants, including Trump, Giuliani, and Meadows. According to the indictment down in Georgia, and according to the January 6 report, Jeffrey Clark drafted a Justice Department memo alerting election officials in the key battleground states Trump lost. He wrote a memo alerting election officials in those states that the Justice Department had credible evidence of voter fraud, and in the memo urged these states to send a separate slate of electors representing Trump to be counted on January 6th. And Trump lobbied the acting Attorney General at the time, Jeffrey Rosen, to sign the memo. Don't worry, we'll find the voter fraud for you. Jeffrey Clark, is reported to have handed the draft of his memo, filled with nothing but lies. He handed this draft of the memo to then acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and Rosen's deputy, Richard Donoghue. And Clark, this low-level Justice Department official, instructed the acting Attorney General that President Trump wanted him to sign this memo. Clark is then reported to have warned acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen that if he refused to sign the memo, Clark would then replace him as acting Attorney General of the United States. Well, Jeffrey Rosen, the acting Attorney General who replaced Bill Barr, refused to sign it. And then a showdown took place inside the Oval Office where Trump said he was going to name Jeffrey Clark, acting Attorney General. But then Trump immediately backed off after acting Attorney General Jeffrey Rosen and Richard Donoghue, his deputy, warned Trump that the entire Justice Department would resign if he followed through with this and named Jeffrey Clark acting Attorney General. And now, yesterday, Jeffrey Clark moved one step closer to losing his law license. Yes, he still has his law license. The District of Columbia's Office of Disciplinary Counsel officially recommended yesterday that Jeffrey Clark be disbarred. A final decision must be made by the District of Columbia Court of Appeals. The disciplinary panel found in its ruling yesterday that Jeffrey Clark, conspired with the former president to create chaos during the lead-up to January 6 in an attempt to block the certification of the election for Joe Biden. Now, I've gone over this before. The purpose of January 6 of the Green Bay sweep was to throw the election into the House of Representatives. It was all about creating chaos and doubt about the election results. They wanted the Supreme Court to rule, well, there's no way to determine what the count is, so we're going to throw the election into the House of Representatives, where, because of how each state is weighted, Donald Trump would emerge the victor. That was what January 6th was all about. Create doubt, create chaos, convince the Supreme Court and the American people that it's impossible to determine who won. And so the election must be decided in the House, where each state gets one vote. And because there are more red states than there are blue states, Trump would have won re-election easily. Writing on behalf of the disciplinary board, Hamilton Fox III said, quote, Jeffrey Clark betrayed his oath to support the Constitution of the United States of America. He is not fit to be a member of the District of Columbia Bar. But he is fit to serve as Attorney General if, God forbid, Donald Trump finds his way back in the Oval Office. One of Trump's top picks for Attorney General would be Jeffrey Clark. Good luck getting that approved by the Senate. Back in, if there is a Senate after November's election, back in January, a jury ruled that Donald Trump had to pay journalist E. Jean Carroll $83.3 million in damages after they found he did, in fact, defame her. A jury last year awarded E. Jean Carroll $5 million after it found Trump guilty of raping Carroll back in the 1990s, and then they ruled that he defamed her when she went public with the story. In March, last 2 months ago now, Trump posted a $91 million bond that will be held by the court while Trump appeals the ruling. On Thursday of last week, Judge Lewis Kaplan, who presided over both E. Jean Carroll defamation lawsuits and the punitive trial for rape, on Thursday, Judge Lewis Kaplan rejected Trump's plea for a new trial. The judge also rejected Trump's request to dismiss the judgment outright. In rejecting the two motions, Judge Lewis Kaplan said Trump's argument, quote, defies common sense, unquote. Judge Kaplan added that Trump's cruel and defamatory statements about E. Jean Carroll were disseminated to at least 100 million Americans and thereby placed E. Jean Carroll's physical and emotional security at risk. It's worth mentioning that in two previous rulings, Judge Lewis Kaplan has made it clear that a jury last year did in fact rule that Trump raped E. Jean Carroll. He did not sexually assault her. He raped her, said Judge Lewis Kaplan. I get a lot of MAGA supporters who say, he didn't rape her, it was sexual assault. Tell me what the difference is. Judge Kaplan says there is no difference. In one of his rulings, he explained that in common law parlance, forced penetration of any kind is defined as rape. This is why the owners of 194 units inside Trump Plaza, a high-rise luxury condominium in New Rochelle, a suburb of New York, are voting once again on whether it makes financial sense to remove Trump's name from their building. 2 years ago, a majority of owners in the building voted to remove Trump's name, but bylaws in the building insist on a supermajority. And removing Trump's name, the vote didn't meet the threshold of a supermajority. A second round of voting on whether to remove Trump's name from Trump Plaza began earlier this year, and according to the Washington Post, it's creating a mini civil war with a majority of owners in the building wanting Trump's name taken off, claiming the name Trump makes the property less valuable, while a minority of Trump supporters insist the only reason they bought the condo in the building is because it had Trump's name. So this is a metaphor for our government. A majority of the condo owners in Trump Plaza want Trump's name scrubbed, but you need to have a filibuster-proof majority. So the minority holds sway over Trump Plaza. Well, who is going to be Donald Trump's running mate? Who? Who wants to face the wrath of his MAGA morons when they bring out the noose after you refuse to follow one of Donald Trump's illegal orders? One of the top contenders for vice president was South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem, but she's been subjected to a cascade of negative publicity ever since Trump became the presumptive nominee, and everybody thought she'd be an attractive pick. Noem has gone from top contender to that dog don't hunt. First, there were reports of Kristi Noem carrying on a months-long affair with Trump's first campaign manager, Corey Lewandowski, even though Noem and Lewandowski were already married to other people. Lewandowski has a long history of women accusing him of sexual and physical assault, which might explain why Noem needed to go down to Dallas and get her teeth fixed. Remember this story? Kristi Noem decided to get work done on her teeth. That is an actual photograph she posted on Instagram, and she tried to pay for her dental work by cutting a series of infomercials for the cosmetic dentistry office that performed the surgery. She did this while governor of South Dakota. The governor of South Dakota thought it was okay to do infomercials for a dentist. It's probably illegal. This is one of the posts she put up on one of her social media accounts. It's probably illegal if I don't know if anything's illegal anymore in this country. It's definitely unethical, as well as maybe embarrassing, but can a Republican feel shame? Turns out when Kristi Noem talked about getting rid of Old Yeller, I thought she was talking about her teeth, but it was her dog Cricket. Yeah. In her new autobiography, Kristi Noem writes about her willingness to make the tough decision of killing her puppy. Yes, in her new autobiography, Kristi Noem brags about shooting to death the family puppy Cricket. Cricket was her hunting dog, and Kristi Noem writes that Cricket barked too much, and she said was a bit too joyful. Well, you can't have that. So she got out her shotgun and killed Cricket. And right after that, she writes, she decided to kill one of the family goats because just like Cricket the puppy, the goat didn't know how to behave. Mommy snapped and went on a killing spree. That's what happened. And in her fevered mind, she thinks this is a selling point to include in her autobiography because it shows you can make the tough decisions. Mommy was having a bad day as governor, and she killed the family puppy, and then shot the goat. This, I'm sorry, Divine has passed away, because if we were going to make a movie, I would have Divine playing the role of Governor Kristi Noem having a bad day, killing the family puppy and the goat. And she said right after she killed the goat, there was blood all over her, and one of her kids got off the school bus. Hi, I made cookies. This is Divine. If I had to cast this, it's just Divine would be Divine playing Kristi Noem. But she tells this story in her autobiography that just came out. She wrote an autobiography because, she wants to be vice president. And she includes this story because she thinks she's telling voters, I can make tough decisions. No, you're demented. You're a puppy killer and a goat killer, and considering the state of your marriage, I suspect the real reason you killed that goat is because you were jealous of the attention it was getting from your husband. I suspect. That's what I've heard. That's what people are saying. I don't know if that's true, that Kristi Noem's husband was flirting with the goat because Kristi Noem was carrying on an affair with Corey Lewandowski. That's what people are saying. I don't know if that, I hope it's not true, but I would hate to think that the governor of South Dakota has a husband who's turned on by goats. And so I hope that's not true, but that's what I hear me saying right now. So, I hope it's not true. Yes, so she's not vice presidential material. Then again, it's Donald Trump. She might be perfect to be Donald Trump's running mate. Another woman, it's got to be a woman who is Donald Trump's running mate. Elise Stefanik, one of the most odious people ever to walk the face of the earth. Harvard-educated Elise Stefanik, who's part of the House Republican leadership. She's married to a gun lobbyist. Her husband kisses her. Well, he probably doesn't kiss her, but he says goodbye every morning and then goes off to work for this gun lobbying organization that tries to get as many AR-15s into the hands of school shooters as possible. That's what her husband does for a living. How do we assist the manufacturers of AR-15s to find new markets here in the United States? How do we get more Uvaldes? That's what Elise Stefanik, that's what her husband does for a living. She wants to be Trump's running mate, and to prove her love and loyalty to Donald Trump, yesterday she filed an ethics complaint against special counsel Jack Smith. She's accusing him of election interference. Yes, it's very hard for Donald Trump to run for office if he's held accountable for his crimes. Well, who's the vice president? Donald Trump has reportedly had it with Arizona's Kari Lake. Join the club. We all have. And Donald Trump wants Lake to leave the club, specifically Mar-a-Lago. He's sick of her hanging out in Mar-a-Lago. Kari Lake and Marjorie Taylor Greene have been spending a lot of time at Mar-a-Lago, sucking up to Trump, trying to get named as Trump's running mate. And Trump loves to see two women bickering over him. He plays them against one another. But now Trump has made it abundantly clear that Kari Lake and Marjorie Taylor Greene don't stand a chance. And more importantly, the Washington Post reports that Donald Trump has told Kari Lake to stop hanging out at Mar-a-Lago. According to new reporting in the Washington Post, Trump ordered Kari Lake to leave. He said, go someplace, go campaign. What are you doing here? Go raise money. Why are you hanging out at Mar-a-Lago? He has also confided that he thinks Kari Lake is dragging him down in Arizona. She's running for Senate in Arizona. And he says, if I lose the state of Arizona to Joe Biden once again, it will be Kari Lake's fault. Trump also is reportedly infuriated and no longer trusts Kari Lake after he was told she records all her conversations. The chairman of the Republican Party in Arizona had to step down because he allegedly offered her a bribe not to run for Senate, and she recorded the conversation. And Donald Trump doesn't want any of his conversations recorded. So Trump needs a woman. It can't be Kari Lake, can't be Kristi Noem, can't be Marjorie Taylor Greene, maybe Elise Stefanik, but if you're looking for somebody, there's always George Santos. Not George Santos, but his alter ego, drag queen Katera Ravache, who George Santos announced yesterday he has dragged out of mothballs. And she, his alter ego, Katera Ravache, is now available for personalized videos on Cameo. Isn't that great? He denied that he was ever a drag queen, but now Katera Ravache, for $20 on Cameo, will record a message for you. This is what what he says on Cameo. Hey, you messy bitches. Still, once you've been in Congress, you can't shake that stilted language that, hey, you messy bitches. After 18 years in the closet, I'm back for a limited time. 10% of every Cameo will go to Tunnel to Towers and 10% to the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews. Sure it will. He's a man of his word. If he says 20% of the money will go to charity, sure it will. And he made Christian a possessive. He had an apostrophe there. Poor Katera Ravache. Wouldn't she make a great vice president for Donald Trump? Certainly better than rageaholic Marjorie Taylor Greene, who, like Kristi Noem, likes to shoot things. And now that Marjorie Taylor Greene has realized she won't be Trump's running mate, the big question in Washington this morning is, will she go rogue and pull the trigger on the motion she filed for Speaker Mike Johnson to vacate the chair? There are reports that Donald Trump has been working behind the scenes, trying to convince Marjorie to back off on Mike Johnson. Twice in the past 2 weeks, Donald Trump has said he supports Mike Johnson as Speaker. He also said this week that Trump said this week that Marjorie Taylor Greene likes Mike Johnson. It's not true. But in Trump's imagination, if I say it, Marjorie will think it's true, and then she'll get in line. But it looks like since she's not going to be vice president, she's not taking her orders anymore from Donald Trump. And Mike Johnson is in a little trouble with his caucus because of money. The Washington Post reports that Speaker Johnson's fundraising powers pale in comparison to his predecessor, Kevin McCarthy. For the first quarter of the year, Johnson's super PAC raised only $9 million. From January to the end of March, he was only able to raise $9 million, which is 1/3 of the roughly $27 million that then Speaker Kevin McCarthy was able to raise during the first quarter of last year. Now, speakers become speaker because they spread the money around. But then again, that didn't work so good for Kevin McCarthy. Kevin McCarthy was a well-oiled money machine, and they tossed him to the curb anyway. But now they're going to lose the House because they don't have enough money. In order to run for office, these Congress people, these House Republicans need money. And Mike Johnson isn't making it rain. Rich donors reportedly are creeped out by him. Well, then I must be a rich donor. So Mike doesn't have the money to buy Marjorie Taylor Greene's support. However, the Democratic Party has once again come to his rescue. For the first time since Mike Johnson pushed the Ukraine supplemental through, House Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries announced that Democrats will vote against Greene's motion to vacate the chair. Hakeem Jeffries said, "It's time to silence the pro-Putin wing of the Republican Party." Hakeem Jeffries said yesterday because Mike Johnson acted responsibly by bringing the Ukraine supplemental to the floor, he has earned the Democratic Party's support. Marjorie Taylor Greene responded to that announcement by saying this serves as further proof that in Washington, D.C., there is only one party. That's right, Marjorie, and you're not invited. Marjorie promised now more than ever to bring the motion to vacate the chair to the floor so Republicans would have to go on record that they were willing to work with Democrats. They say democracy is messy. Well, maybe one day we should give it a try here in the United States. I'm David Feldman, reminding you to stay strong and protect the weak. If you enjoyed any of this, please like the video so I remain in your feed. Please share it with your friends. Please subscribe to this channel and, of course, my newsletter. Thank you so much for listening.